Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor, third week in a row, to bring you quality fantasy football content. Guys, Fantasy Elite here for the third week in a row. My virtual partner in crime, Joe. Joe, how you doing, man?
Doing great. Ready to talk about football. It's almost here. Week 3 of the preseason. Let's go.
We're getting so close. We just have one more, I wouldn't call it miserable week, but it's a tough week. Preseason week 4 is a bit of a toughie. Preseason week 3, we get to see some interesting things, so that's always a plus to get to see some starters out on the field. But it draws closer to football. This is the biggest draft weekend coming up. I think a lot of people are excited. We have a lot
Christmas in July or August.
There you go, Christmas in August, baby. So we're getting really close. We're happy to be back for you guys. You ask, we deliver. We had some questions that some people brought up in our Discord. If you aren't in our Discord, go ahead and join that up. I'm gonna link all of the Twitter, the Discord, the YouTube channel. I'm gonna make sure that I link it in here to the live. Make sure that if you're not in there, join up. It's just we're talking about fantasy football all the time, and we want to get you guys questions answered. So if you ask them in there or on stream, we'll make sure that we try and get to them. Joe, the first thing that we want to talk about is we're gonna go and cover a couple of players from each division here, and we're gonna talk about mainly players that are being overdrafted and underdrafted, right? So, obviously, when we look at ADPs, they tell us where people have been drafting them over a large average number of drafts, right? Like thousands and thousands of drafts, where people are being taken and what round and overall, as opposed to also their position group and stuff like that. Let's talk about a couple of players that we feel like are being drafted too highly. We don't think that they're really gonna fulfill their overall season value where they're being taken right now. Who's your first overdrafted person? Tell me the division that they're coming from, and obviously a little bit about them.
So we'll go through methodically. So let's go division by division. So from the AFC North, our first overdrafted player, in my opinion at least, is Martavis Bryant. So this guy, he's a guy that everybody knows has a ton of talent. He's been suspended, and that's been hurting him. But he's being drafted middle of the 4th round in 12-team leagues right now. This is a guy who his best season ever was 765 yards, 50 catches, and 6 touchdowns. Why is he being drafted ahead of guys like Michael Crabtree, Kelvin Benjamin, Allen Robinson, people who are going to get tons of targets, people who are playing on, or who are the number 1 receivers on their offenses, and people who've played in the league for more than a year and a half, basically?
Right.
What's going on?
I don't know. He's been out. He's been out a lot of games too, which is just worrisome. Not necessarily from injury, but also suspension. His next one could be the end, right? Isn't it like a full season? His next one, I think.
I mean, the last one was a full season.
Yeah,
so
okay.
the next one could be, he could be getting the Josh Gordon treatment if he screws up again.
Right. Yeah, definitely no doubt there. I think people are getting caught up in the talent argument, right? Like the guy's got so much talent, this and that.
That's great, but even if he does have all this talent, like he's still not the number 1 receiver on his team, and he has no chance to become that. Antonio Brown is number 1, Le'Veon Bell's number 2. He's the 3rd receiver on an offense that's really good, but come on, I mean, he's not going to get more than 1,000 yards for sure. He's never got more than 700.
That's a great point.
So, all right. So that's with the AFC North. Martavis Bryant's being overdrafted. What are you thinking about the AFC East?
About the AFC East, I think the person that I believe is being overdrafted the most is Brandon Cooks. This was a bit of a tough one. There's not a ton of players in the AFC East that are being crazy overdrafted. I honestly, Gronk was my first thought, but honestly, I think he's really good value right now. And you know how against him I am. I just think he's really injury prone. So I actually think he's being pretty appropriately drafted. But let's suspend belief that he's going to get hurt, really early in the season this year. Him, Julian Edelman, I'm sure Malcolm Mitchell will be somewhere in the mix, and then a host of running backs that they all have. Plus Brandon Cooks now. You're having a hard time convincing me that guy is going to be a 100 reception, 1,200 yard, and 10 touchdown eight plus touchdown kind of guy, right? And that's what he needs to be at the minimum if he's being taken, at the end of the 2nd round. I think it is. I'm pretty sure.
It's early 3, late 2.
Early three, early three, late two. There's some guys there that I'm way more willing to take a chance on, like you said, that are bona fide number ones, right? I've seen AJ Green being drafted around the same time that Brandon Cooks is. DeAndre Hopkins is being drafted later than he is. Even somebody like Amari Cooper, right? Somebody like Amari Cooper is at least one of two in his system, right? So, with Brandon Cooks, there's a lot of mouths to feed there, and we already know what he is. He's a run fast, and he's going to run in a straight line, and he's going to catch it. If they figure out a way to do more with him, great, so be it, but I still don't think that you're going to see over 100 receptions and 1,200 yards and 8 touchdowns, which you all need to be that guy, which is really going to hold down potentially your number 1 wide receiver spot or your number 2 receiver spot, with then being weak at running back. So I think he's a guy that I'm looking to wait off a little bit and try and get a little bit later value.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you there. And not only for the reasons that you stated, but this is a team that looks like they're going to win a lot of games. They're going to win them pretty bad.
Yep.
Half their division, or most of their division already quit basically for the season. So in the fourth quarter, they're not going to be chucking it around. They're not going to be needing to in a lot of their games. And that's going to really limit his value as a deep threat.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic point.
So my next guy from the AFC South is T.Y. Hilton. He's being drafted end of round 2 right now. And I have nothing against T.Y. Hilton. He's a fantastic player. He's a good deep threat, but he's also kind of learned how to play shallower and kind of become a little bit more consistent as his career's gone on. But his quarterback's barely throwing a football right now. And I don't want to pick my number 1 receiver. If you're being drafted end of round 2, you're basically a wide receiver 1 pretty much. I don't want my number 1 receiver to be catching passes from Scott Tolzien the first half of the year. So it's all due to Andrew Luck's uncertainty, or the uncertainty surrounding his shoulder and his health. But I'm pretty scared of taking that guy that high.
Yeah, without a doubt. That I was really high on Andrew Luck before more non-information came out about his arm. I'm really worried about a guy who's not throwing this close to the season either. And you're right, T.Y. Hilton's a quality player, but people have been taking him as high as 202, right? Like turn of the second round. I mean, that's absurdly high for a guy that is and it's not like Andrew Luck has a quality backup, right? It's not like Hasselbeck is still backing him up. I mean, you're right. Scott Tolzien does not really get my jimmies, going for what, the first potentially 3-4 games of the season. That's rough, man. I tend to really agree with you. I think it's a dangerous pick, a really dangerous pick, and he has had some injury concerns in his seasons already, so he's not bulletproof either.
Yeah, so let's head over to the AFC West. So what are you feeling about those guys?
In the AFC West, I spoke about him already, but I got to bring him up again. Amari Cooper is somebody who I feel like is being overdrafted. I do have to give a small caveat to this, though. This is less about Amari, right? I think Amari is actually an exceptional player in real football. I think he's much more valuable in real football than he is in fantasy. Few too many drops, but I think he's a really good real football player. He runs exceptional routes, and he's just a stellar player. But you can get Crabtree 2 rounds later, at least 2 rounds later, right? In plenty of drafts, and he's the same thing or more as far as fantasy value is concerned, right? The last 2 years, he's outproduced him in fantasy value, and he's 2 rounds later. I'm not going to pick the guy who's in the same exact tier 2 rounds earlier. It doesn't make any sense, right? He's got to make it to a point where he's basically free for me to take him when I can get his sibling that does the exact same thing 2 rounds later. So this is, and there's always the argument for upside, and Amari does have upside. He's going to get better as a player. He's going to become a perennially good pro, or he already is a really good pro, but you have to be careful. Fantasy football is a game of value. You said yourself, you're a value slave. Getting a guy who you can get 2 rounds later, jumping up for that guy, that doesn't make you getting good value.
Yeah, and Cooper does have the upside, but Crabtree's got a special place in Derek Carr's heart for some reason. We're not really sure why.
Maybe it's because they're both mediocre at best.
Yeah, probably so.
All right, so who's your overdrafted for NFC North?
From the NFC North, there's a lot of good options up there. We're going to go with Martellus Bennett. So he's a tight end who's been pretty mediocre throughout his career, despite having being very athletic and always being talked about as having a high ceiling. He's been been pretty mediocre. He went to the Patriots last year, was pretty mediocre even when Gronk was out, which is saying something because they like to throw the big tight ends. And then Belichick let him walk and traded for Dwayne Allen. So if Belichick's picking Dwayne Allen over you, that says a lot to me. But further than that, now he's playing in the Packers offense, which is while it's a great offense, Aaron Rodgers doesn't throw the ball to his tight end.
No.
Almost never. So don't draft him. Like, why is he being drafted ahead of guys like Kyle Rudolph and Zach Ertz, who their quarterbacks love throwing the ball to the tight end? Right. It's not about athleticism. Nobody's going to argue. Martellus Bennett's more athletic than those guys. But Rodgers doesn't like throwing to the tight end.
Yeah, there's a couple of really specific points that you made that absolutely nail it home here. Aside from maybe 1 year where Jermichael Finley had like 8 touchdowns, I think Richard Rodgers had one where it was like a high touchdown year too. Aaron Rodgers just doesn't make his tight ends very worthwhile in fantasy, right? Devontae Adams and Jordy Nelson just aren't going away, and the cap for a Green Bay tight end is 60 receptions, maybe somewhere around there, and it's not going to be a high yards per average. It's not going to be something some insanely high number. So you're limited there just by the scheme fit. And then the other thing is that the 1 year that Martellus Bennett really blew up was, what do you know, a Jay Cutler year. Right. It's a Jay Cutler year when he just literally decided to throw every single ball to a 6'3" and above person, and he carried 3 receivers that year. Basically, it wasn't something that Martellus Bennett did, is what I'm getting at. He is an athletic player. He's solid. I think he's better. He's one of those players. He's also better for real football than he is for fantasy. Yeah. But you're right. All the points that you bring up, Bill Belichick let him walk, traded for a guy in Dwayne Allen, hurt, not that great, not a lot of upside, but he does his job. I'm not excited about that guy. And you're right. Every year somebody wants to say, this is the year that Aaron Rodgers tight end is going to be worth something. He's never worth something. Don't pick the guy, especially over people who are getting 100 balls, He's been
the best quarterback one of the best quarterbacks in the league for like 10 years now, and he's never had a good tight end. So why is he going to start now?
Right. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. All right, going NFC East rather. The guy that's being overdrafted for me, I'm all in this tight right second-ish, early third round area right here. Des Bryant is also somebody who's being overdrafted to me, and this is for 2 major reasons. Number one, Dak Prescott, for all I think he's a safe pick, is not going to be as good as he was last year. It's just almost inevitable that he will regress some. They have more tape. NFL teams have more tape, to look at. And he hasn't changed much of the things that he still did in college that were the reason that he was a 4th-round pick, which apparently everybody just decides to gloss over right now, right? He drops his eyes when the blitz is coming. He looks to scramble a bit too much. He's uncomfortable in the pocket to a certain extent, and he's one of those guys that he's never gonna force feed the top option. He just isn't. Dez is a really, really good receiver. Dez is incredibly talented, and he's shown us that he can do it before. But he needs somebody to be willing to throw him the ball almost no matter what. Dak just doesn't look like the guy that's going to do that. That's not terrible. He's not going to turn the ball over a lot, but he's may not win you the game. Likely won't win you the game, right? When you're down and you need to come back by a lot of points. That's where Dez can really, really make his money. So it's more Dak is sort of limiting him to me, but also even last year, the injuries are just constant at this point, right? So what do we not want to do in the first 2 rounds? Lose, right? We just don't want to lose. Right? Dez is a guy that can potentially make you lose in one of those first 2 rounds. So I'm avoiding him around that time. Now, if you get him sort of round 3, he could be your second receiver with a solid running back. He's way more appealing to me in that case, but I'm staying away from him at the early, he's being drafted at the 1-2 turn right now, no later than like the 2nd round. I'm just not willing to take a chance on him there.
Yeah. I mean, I totally agree with you. Like, here's the thing with Dez. He's not a separation creating receiver. He's a guy who's going to win because he's a big body.
Yeah.
And Dak is a conservative quarterback, and he's not really comfortable throwing those passes into coverage yet. Like, Dez is going to win on the back shoulder throws or the jump balls. That's where he makes his money. Right. Maybe the slants and tight coverage where he can use his big body and shield somebody off and catch the ball.
And he is really good at those things. He's really good at
it. You put him with a quarterback who wants to throw that ball like Romo, and he's going to do a lot of damage.
Right.
Like he did for all those years with Romo. But Dak's not comfortable making that throw, and quite frankly, he's not accurate enough to make those throws consistently yet either, like with all the problems that you mentioned in the pocket. So, Yeah, I totally agree. I think he's never caught 100 balls, so you're already overdrafting him kind of if you're expecting him to do that.
It's a good point.
Even with Romo, he never caught 100 balls.
Right.
So the injury problems, the Dak's inaccuracy, the fact that he's never caught 100 with Romo, now he's going to catch 70 with Dak. They don't throw it as much. It's pretty risky.
Yeah, I think you really nailed it home. This is not a Dez problem necessarily, right? That this is much less of a Dez problem.
Yeah.
You have to be aware of what his system is and who his quarterback is. Like you just can't throw those facts out the window. And his quarterback is Dak, and for the reasons that you brought up, he's just not worth taking where he is. So.
Yeah, so next we're going to roll over to what in my opinion is the easiest of all of these overdrafted players, which is Adrian Peterson out of the NFC South for the Saints. He's being drafted at the end of the 4th round. Yeah, people, Mark Ingram is being drafted at the end of the 5th round. Mark Ingram is the starting running back.
Yeah.
Like, there's no doubt about it. Like, Mark is the starting running back, and he's almost certainly going to be, barring an injury, throughout the entire season. So, I mean, even without looking at who else is being drafted below him, he's being drafted. Backup running back's being drafted ahead of the starter. What's going on?
Yep.
Not to mention they're playing in the Saints offense, which is an offense that Sean Payton historically is fickle and just distributes the ball to all the different running backs. So they have 3 running backs, Ingram, Peterson, and Kamara, who are all sustainable at this point, or who are all going to get touches at least, between 5 and 15 touches each, the 3 of them. So he's got a cap on his touches. He's not the starting running back. Don't draft him in the 4th round.
Yeah, I think one of the points you and I talked about this is off stream, but we talked about this the other day. All of the scenarios in which Adrian Peterson really excels this year, every single one of them includes Mark Ingram getting hurt, right? I'm not saying that Mark Ingram is the shining example of health. He's not. But you're literally relying on that guy to get hurt before he can do any sort of major damage for you. Mark Ingram is the starter. He's going to start the season. And I'll tell you the other thing is Kamara looks pretty good to me. I've been watching all the preseason games for all the teams. Kamara looks pretty good for me, and the Saints line is no worse than top 10 in my opinion. So I just can't imagine that there's a way without Mark getting hurt. I can't imagine that there's a way that Adrian Peterson really pops off this year. Sean Payton is just not going to let one person get 20 carries a game. It just never has happened in the Saints offense. It never will happen in the Saints offense. So him being drafted in the 4th round is just absolutely absurd. That probably is one of the easiest ones of the entire crew.
Yeah, I mean, let's be clear. It's not really an Adrian Peterson problem. Correct. Like, I'm not even speculating about his health or anything like that. I think he probably is going to be healthy enough to be fine most of the season. Not any more likely to get hurt than any other running back. Right. But he's basically, as far as I'm concerned, in the same or even a slightly worse situation than Tevin Coleman is out of Atlanta. In the sense that they're like a clear backup, but they're going to get 10 carries a game, probably right around there. So they're in a similar situation, but their real value comes if the starter gets hurt. Otherwise, they're like a flex play.
Well, the other thing,
so you wouldn't draft. Nobody's drafting Tevin Coleman in the 4th round. Don't draft Adrian Peterson there.
Right, and the other thing is too is that they have a viable 3rd option there that the Atlanta Falcons don't really have. It's not that they have bad players, but Kamara looks like a pretty good player, and I would say that the Saints are notorious for using that type of player as well, right? So you're literally doing all the things working against yourself here, and this is coming from a person I personally think Adrian Peterson is arguably the greatest running back of all time. I really do, but it doesn't change the fact that once again it's like Dez, right? You have to take his situation into account. You can't just discount these things and then expect all of your decisions to go right, So
yeah. So before we move on to the next set of the, I guess you have one more, right?
I have one more.
All right, go ahead, and then we'll make a point.
Yeah, no worries. So in the NFC West, I think this one's a pretty easy one too. I will admit this one is a bit of an unknown because he was traded, and now there's some ambiguity as far as where he's being drafted overall. So there's a little bit of up and down here, but Sammy Watkins going to the Rams is just a tough one for me to swallow. You said it as a joke to somebody, but it's actually really funny. The 3 games that he plays for you, he's got the worst quarterback he's got the quarterback that throws the worst deep ball in the league, right? So taking that into account without the exaggeration, Sammy Watkins is very unlikely. If there's a player that I have to put a bet on that's not going to play the whole season, he's up there. He's top 5 for me that I'm probably taking that bet, right? So it's unlikely. You're capping yourself right off the bat. And then he really does. Jared Goff is one of the worst quarterbacks in the league. not just to hold up fantasy wise. He's bad in real football too. He's not all of a sudden becoming better. So Sammy Watkins he's a good receiver. Like he's very talented, but he's hurt and he's really limited in the Rams offense. If they come out really, really guns a-blazing and Sammy Watkins performs well this year, God bless you. I'll admit defeat to you. It's fine. Like no, I'll be okay with losing that battle. I'm not taking a guy that's being drafted in the, he's being drafted amongst the Jarvis Landry's, Stephon Diggs of the world. Those guys who are literally going to catch, well, Jarvis not so much, but like Stephon Diggs and Julian Edelman are being drafted right around him. Those guys are going to catch 90 balls this year. Sammy will catch 60 if he stays pretty healthy. Like, I'm not willing to take that chance on him because most people are picking him up as their third receiver kind of thing, and that's second or third receiver. That's dangerous.
Yeah, I think that Sammy does more for the Rams offense than the Rams offense does for him.
100%.
In the sense that like people are going to be double covering him because there's not anybody else to cover on that team. And so he's going to help Gurley out a little bit. He's going to help Goff out a little bit by taking the top off. But I mean, I wouldn't trust him as a reliable fantasy option. Yeah,
if anything, the things that get, now I'm not saying go draft these guys. Careful, disclaimer here, right? But I think if anything in real football, it helps people like Tavon Austin and Robert Woods, right? I think it helps those kind of guys more than anyone else. And you're right, Gurley to an extent. I think they're still going to stack the box a lot against them, but I think it helps real football Rams offense rather than Rams offense helps Sammy Watkins. So, yeah.
Yeah. So before we move to the underdrafted guys, which is going to be a fun segment, I think that it's important to make the point that really one of the main common themes among all of these overdrafted guys is that we're not saying in fantasy you don't draft talent, you draft people who are going to score you a lot of fantasy points.
Yep, 100%.
So like this is why Dez goes in the second round, is people are like, oh, he's really talented. He's one of the top 10 receivers in the league. He is, but he's not one of the top 10 fantasy receivers in the league.
That's exactly right. I couldn't say it better myself. That's precise. And we're also saying, be careful. We're also saying, we're not saying don't draft these players either, right? Like nothing is coming out of our mouth like, hey, don't ever take Dez, right? That's dumb. That's stupid. But you have to find where people are valuable and take them there and not overpay for them. That's how you win in fantasy. Fantasy is a game of value odds, right? We're not saying don't take people. We're not saying never consider them. We're just saying it's where they're being taken needs to proceed with caution.
Absolutely. All right, so on to the underdrafted. We'll let you kick this one off. Out of the AFC East, what you got?
AFC East, my underdrafted was pretty easy on this one. We talked about him previously on stream, and we're going to hammer it home. Devontae Parker is going to get fed this year, right? You've been hearing it now. Now I want to make a specific distinction. This is very important. I've been hearing a lot of people talk about Devontae Parker as the sleeper that's going to win you your draft, this and that, and this has been happening for 2 years, right? He was an exceptionally talented player. He was the first receiver taken overall, I think, the year that he came out. He had a lot of hype with him. That's great. He is really talented. People have been talking about him in the past before he had Jay Cutler. Jay Cutler feeds people that are 6'3 plus, and he will just literally throw you ball after ball after ball after ball. Okay, it's not this isn't Ryan Tannehill's Devontae Parker. This is smoking Jay Cutler's Devontae Parker, and that's a big difference. Okay, so you have to take this with context moving forward. This is not a recycled Devontae Parker, hey, he's going to win you your league. This is a legitimately, you can grab him around earlier than his ADP, and he legitimately might be your good second receiver by the time that the season's over. Yeah,
totally. And I mean, all you need to know really is that after the first week of preseason, or the first preseason game that Jay Cutler played, so their second preseason, this was this week, after the game, he said, the quote is he said that Devontae Parker is like a faster Alshon Jeffrey.
Right. And what did he do to Alshon?
Everybody knows what Jay Cutler did with Alshon Jeffrey.
Right.
So
literally 140 targets every year minimum, and that was after not only did he say that, it followed the box score of him literally of the 6 passes he threw, 4 of them went to Devontae Parker.
Yeah.
Like, come on.
So he backed it up.
If he can't be any more obvious with who he wants to throw to, just look at the numbers, look at what he says, listen to Jay, don't listen to us. That's fine. But Devontae Parker is a guy that I would be looking for around early in these coming drafts, especially this weekend.
Yep. Absolutely. So I'll go next with the AFC South. My underdrafted player is DeAndre Hopkins. He's going at the end of round 3 right now, and everybody's still got this nasty taste of what happened with DeAndre Hopkins last year. Let's be clear, that was a Brock Osweiler problem.
Yep.
The season before, DeAndre Hopkins had 1,500 yards with none other than Brian Hoyer. So it's not like he can't produce with a bad quarterback. Brock, just nobody can produce with that guy. That much is clear. It's so bad that Brock got beat out in Cleveland, but let's not belittle Brock anymore. He belittles himself on the field. Let's talk about DeAndre. This dude is, talent-wise, he's a top receiver in the NFL. But not only that, they don't have a whole lot else. Corey Fuller's out for the first half of the season. And I think they're going to funnel him the ball. I mean, Tom Savage is a young quarterback. Deshaun Watson's a young quarterback. These guys tend to latch on to big-time players. And I think they're going to funnel DeAndre Hopkins the ball.
Yeah,
we're looking at 150 targets probably, and he's probably going to catch at least 75% of those, I'd imagine.
Yeah, I mean, with Brock not in the game, throwing him into the dirt, he should catch at least 65% of those passes.
Yeah, 65,
right?
yeah.
Like that's the minimum. There's no way that you get it near that guy and he doesn't catch it. He's very good. He has excellent hands. He's a super refined route runner. Nuck is one of my favorite players in the entire NFL. He's a very, very well refined receiver. And as long as you get it in the vicinity of him, which every other quarterback seems to be able to do besides Brock Osweiler, he's going to catch the ball and he's going to be exceptionally productive. You also brought up a good point. Will Fuller's out for the season. He's not. It's not. He doesn't. And that was probably the person that had the most opportunity to take things away from him besides Brock. So with him not being there, I think Tom Savage has enough brain to get him the ball. So I think DeAndre Hopkins is an obvious choice. I'm even going to go a step further than that and say that DeAndre Hopkins is just as likely to be a top 5, top 6 receiver this year in fantasy output. And he's being drafted in the 3rd round. That's a guy that you want to be considering as far as value is concerned. So
he's going at the end of the 3rd. I'd want him at the end of the 2nd. Where would you want him?
I mean, my tier list dictate otherwise. I'd probably be willing. I'd probably be willing to, if I really thought that all the other good players that were worth it to be gone. I'd probably take him top 16 or 17 players overall. Is probably the max that I'd be willing to take him. If I thought that he was really the best available option as my top wide receiver coming back, and I was picking maybe like 6th or 7th in the round, I'd take him there. But if I can get him value at the end of the 2nd, I'm jumping all over that. And then 3rd and later, he's a godsend. He's literally a godsend.
Yeah, if you can get that guy as your number 2 receiver, then you're going to be in really good shape.
You're going to be in great shape. So, all right, moving on to the NFC West. My underdrafted person here is Zach Ertz. Zach Ertz. Now, I'm not a huge fan of the Eagles' offense. I'm not really big on Carson Wentz here. I don't think he's going to be terrible. I think he can support a couple of fantasy players. Definitely hate their running back by committee. I think it's going to be really rough. I think Alshon's going to be hurt, but man, he got like 12 targets a game through his last couple of games of the season, and they just love to throw to the tight end. It's not necessarily a Zach Ertz thing even. He's a really good player. Zach Ertz is a really good player, but they love to throw to the tight end, and they're going to feed that guy. And Carson Wentz, he's the safety blanket for Carson Wentz. So, and once again, young quarterback. He's still going to be learning in the NFL. He's going to be getting better. He's going to use that safety blanket, and especially when people like Alshon get hurt, which he will. Torrey Smith is also, he's a go deep guy. I think Zach Ertz, especially when Alshon is out, you're just going to see monster target numbers. So, and I mean, he's being drafted like 8th or 9th overall tight end. Like, that's amazing value to me for a guy that's probably going to get 100 catches this year, or close to, probably going to get 100 targets this year, 110.
Yeah, I'd be pretty surprised if he didn't end up as a top 6 tight end at the worst. And it's just the target numbers. Right, so there's other guys who are more talented and will get more touchdowns, like Tyler Eifert maybe, but like they only throw the ball to Eifert when he's in the red zone, basically.
Yep.
Whereas like Ertz is just going to get targets. So like while Eifert maybe you'll get 2 touchdowns one game, maybe you'll get nothing in the next game. Ertz is going to be every week he's going to get like 10 targets, and he's going to catch 5-6 of them. So he's not going to get you 0. He's going to get you on the board with 50-60 yards a week, and maybe you'll have a big game here and there.
You know what really excites me about tight ends? I know this sounds so lame, but what really excites me about tight ends, especially if I'm in a PPR league, is when there's 8 drives in a game by X team, and he had a catch on every drive. Like, ooh, it just makes me a little warm inside, you know? Like, I know that every single time that the Eagles are on the field, sans turnover, there's a high chance that Zach Ertz will get one of those touches to move the ball down the field. That's, man, that presents a wonderful floor for a guy that I got in the, 12th round? Something like that, 10th to 12th round? That's phenomenal for me. So, I really, really like Ertz.
Yeah. So, since we went NFC East, now I'll go NFC South. My underdrafted out of the NFC South is Kelvin Benjamin. He's going end of round 4, beginning of round 5. And as I mentioned earlier, he's going behind people like Martavis Bryant. And I don't quite understand all of that. He's going behind Allen Robinson. He's going behind Devontae Adams. And I don't quite understand all that. Now, I know that Kelvin was coming out of shape coming into the season last year, and it probably did slow him down a bit. And also, Cam wasn't quite himself. But I think the way that they're revamping their offense, while I don't think that it's going to be totally successful, I think having these new guys in the slot, which is they want Cam to focus on shorter throws, but I don't think Cam can. But I think having all these new guys in the slot is going to open stuff up for Cam to go deep, Kelvin Benjamin and Greg Olsen also. So I think he's still going to look for those deep outs and those deep ins that Cam is so good at throwing. It's really his strength as a passer is those deep passes we can really fire him in. And I think that having McCaffrey and Curtis Samuel and these other guys in the slot that they're looking to do short passes is just going to open that up even more. I don't put a lot of stock in the preseason as far as stats or anything like that, but I did watch the Panthers play with Derek Anderson, so I don't care about how the offense looked. But Kelvin looked good. He was dominating good cornerbacks, physically dominating them. So he looked in shape. He looked like he was focused. He was catching difficult passes in traffic. I think he looked pretty good. So I think I'd take him early round 4 or late round 3.
Yeah, that deep back shoulder that he had to adjust and come back on in the end zone was a nice pass, right? Like, those are the kind of things when we tell you, like, you brought up a great point, box score is not really a whole lot of, it doesn't matter. I don't care that Kelvin scored there, right? I more care about how he looked on that play. He beat that corner. It was a good throw. If that throw's there in the real season, he's going to make the catch. He looked great. He ran a good route. He adjusted well. It's just, that's the kind of Kelvin Benjamin that I want to see. And he's the number 1 receiver on a team where the guy really likes to drive the ball downfield. That is Cam Newton's strength. He can like you said, he can fire him in there. He puts balls in on a rope. He really, really worries me when he throws touch passes because he likes to float them off of his back foot. And that's something that really worries me. And you're right. They are going to try and run that offense. I'm worried if he can actually do that. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. That's something to look for in preseason this week. But Kelvin Benjamin is the main benefactor to the exact type of throw that he likes to make. And when he's going behind people that are legit number 2s, it's obvious where you should, where you should like him. This is another guy, like you said, getting him in the 5th round is just awesome. It's just great. You get number 1 receiver talent as potentially your 2 or 3, depending on how your draft's been going. So I think he's phenomenal. I actually messed you up last time. Sorry for going east. So I'm going to go west this time, but I'm going to start with the NFC. This one's so obvious for me, and we've talked about it in the past. I know, and I almost skipped him. You had to save me from this one. This was really fun. But Pierre Garçon is the obvious NFC West underdrafted player, right? He's Kyle Shanahan's ex-receiver. That's all that needs to be said. He's Kyle Shanahan's ex-receiver. That guy catches 90 balls, 1,250 yards, and 4 touchdowns every single year. If you're in a PPR league, please do not let someone else draft this guy in the fucking 9th round. Don't let it happen. Don't let that happen. Okay, he's gonna be your number 2 receiver, and you're gonna get him really late. Okay, so it's just, that's a floor too. Like, that's the minimum amount that the Kyle Shanahan X receiver does, whether he's good or not. And Pierre has been in this position before, right? He's been Kyle Shanahan's X receiver before, and his stat line was over 100 balls caught, 1,300 yards, and like 5 touchdowns. That's what they all do. Every single one of them. He's going to chew up between the 20s. He's going to have every yard that you could possibly have, and he's just going to dominate the field between the 20s. Not going to get used a whole lot in the red zone, so do be careful of drafting him in standard leagues. He's not going to catch a crazy amount of touchdowns, but he has an immense floor, and he's being drafted in like the 9th round or the 8th round, I think he's being drafted in right now. So take the guy.
Yeah, and unless you are afraid of Brian Hoyer, just keep in mind that Brian Hoyer supported DeAndre Hopkins' 1,500-yard season. So it's not like we're not saying Hoyer's a fantastic quarterback.
No.
NFL or fantasy, he can support a number one receiver. You can definitely support a number one receiver in Kyle Shanahan's offense.
Also, Brian Hoyer was the person last year that literally made Cameron Meredith a name too. Like, he can support receivers. He's not utter trash. Like, he, especially with an offensive coordinator who understands what needs to happen, he will put him in position to succeed. Now, I'm not saying go draft Brian Hoyer either. Like, that's not what the takeaway here. It's get his ex receiver, right? And that's Pierre Garçon. That's why he's being underdrafted.
Yep. So now we'll go to the NFC North, where my underdrafted player is Kyle Rudolph. And I mean, I'm not going to spend too much time on him because the reasoning is exactly the same as your reasoning for Zach Ertz. It's that Sam Bradford's a check down quarterback. Yep. He's, less athletic Alex Smith. He doesn't like to throw it deep too much. He likes to check down. He's going to check down to the tight end. Kyle Rudolph caught like 90 passes last year. For a tight end, that's as consistent as you're going to get. Nobody's catching more balls than that. So while, again, he's not going to go crazy in any games, he's not going to get you 25 fantasy points or anything like that. He's going to consistently get you on the board, which is better than most tight ends can say, and he's being drafted in the 9th round. Behind guys like Martellus Bennett, who, like we talked about earlier, is going to be crazy inconsistent and won't have as many catches or as many yards as Rudolph will.
Yeah, if you draft Martellus Bennett ahead of Rudolph, you deserve to lose your league. No offense, it's nothing against you. I'm just telling you that you deserve to lose your league. He's a guy that scores you 13 points a week religiously. Like, he's just a 13-point-a-week guy. That's up there with some of the best in the business, sans Gronk and Jimmy Graham's, like, utterly ridiculous years, right, where they scored 19 a week. That's just absurd, right? If you draft somebody who is inconsistent and then you complain about you're getting zeros every week, don't come crying to me when you could have had Rudolph in the 10th round and you didn't take him, So my last guy is from the AFC West. I think he's just being overlooked in general, and it's even more obvious to me now that Mike Williams literally like exploded, splodied his leg. But Tyrell Williams was a viable fantasy receiver last year. Like, viable in all formats, viable. He got picked up late, obviously, when everybody realized that he was tall and catching a lot of touchdowns. But he's a touchdown guy. You can take him in standard leagues. They're fluky, so you need to watch that. And they love to use the tight end. But their tight end scored 15 touchdowns last year, and Tyrell still scored touchdowns last year, right? So and Melvin Gordon ran in a billion from him from 2 yards out, right? So what I'm saying is Phil isn't going to throw that many fewer touchdowns, right? And they've already been funneled. He's already gotten them funneled away from him. So I think that's pretty much a floor for what he had last year. Travis Benjamin, we know what he is. He's a speedy receiver. He's not a bad player overall, but he's there for a reason, and he fills a role in their offense. And then if Keenan Allen is there, he's going to soak up a lot of passes, but Tyrell's their number 2, and he is there as a good big body in the red zone. So don't be afraid to pick that guy when it's coming down to people like him or Marquise Lee, right? Somebody like that, or you're banking on Corey Davis as a rookie or something like that, and you don't want to take a chance. I mean, Tyrell Williams being drafted in like the 13th round, dude. You can take him earlier than that and feel comfortable that you have a guy who's going to score you 10 points a week.
Yeah, I mean, Phil's proven time and again he can support 2 receivers, and obviously the one is why he's healthy is Keenan Allen.
Right.
But Keenan Allen's not the deep ball target, right? He's not going to be running deep down the field catching the ball. That's more where Tyrell Williams is going to do. So they complement each other really well, right? It depends on the team they're going to be playing, but you need both of those types of receivers. You need both of them to be productive, and that offense has proven time and again they can support it. I also think that, as you mentioned, the tight ends had 15 touchdowns last year. As much as Phil likes his tight ends, that's a lot. They were forcing the ball to Gates in the end zone. They're not going to be doing that again because he's basically going to break the record first couple weeks.
Yep.
So they don't have to worry about forcing the ball to Gates in the end zone. I think the tight ends are going to come down to like 10 or 12.
I think
10, and those extra 3 or 4 balls are going to be 3 or 4 touchdowns are going to be spread around. Tyrell Williams might get a couple.
Right. Yeah. I think it's a really good point. All right. Did you have one more? You have one more, right?
Last one out of the AFC North. My guy's Mike Wallace. Now I don't think Mike Wallace is a great football player, and I don't think he's going to have a spectacular fantasy season, but he's being drafted in the middle of the 11th round. He's on a team that threw the ball the most of any team in football last year, more times than any other team the Ravens threw the ball. He's on a team with Joe Flacco, who's the only thing he's good at is throwing the ball really far, and the only thing Mike Wallace is good at is running really far and doing it fast. So it makes sense. And he's the only returning receiver on that team. They lost Steve Smith and Kamar Aiken. So the only guy that Flacco's got any chemistry with is Mike Wallace, and Flacco's been out the whole preseason. So everybody's all high on Jeremy Maclin. I think Wallace is going to be the guy, at least in the beginning of the season, because he's the only guy that Flacco knows. And if they're throwing the ball as much as any other team in the league, I think he's going to have a chance to have 8 targets a game in the 11th round. That's pretty good.
Right. Brashad Perryman is coming back too, but he's not a good football player. Like, I don't know how else to say it. He's just not that good. Right.
That guy's played like 3 games in 2 years.
Yeah,
not worried about him.
He's just not good. And everybody says how fast he is and everything. He hasn't shown me anything that makes me believe that he's even a decent football player. The only caveat I would say to Mike Wallace is, and this is not the reason that he's being drafted in the 11th round, because if you look at his chart, it's been that way for the entire offseason. But Joe Flacco being down is sort of worrisome, but he's supposed to be back when? Week
1. He said he's going to be back week 1.
Okay. That would worry me just a bit if Flacco news starts getting shaky, because behind him is yikes. But
yeah,
I mean, you do. He throws it 2 places, to the running back and really long, right, as far as he can, right,
yeah.
And that's where Mike Wallace likes to run. So I follow the logic, and I think it's a really good pick, especially if you're needy for an upside guy, right? If you need an explosive guy at that point in your draft, look to that guy. He might be able to save you the season.
Yeah, and so like last year, Mike Wallace's stats with Flacco were 72 catches for 1,000 yards and 4 touchdowns.
Yeah.
So it's pretty good value for the 11th round.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great value for the 11th round. Good deal.
And I think it's only going to be higher because he's going to be a higher priority receiver, and he's going to be a second year with Flacco. So anyway,
good deal.
10th round, 9th round, good value for him.
Right. All right, so one of the questions that someone asked us to talk about this week specifically was, there's a few major running back by committees this year that are, I'm not going to lie, they leave you with a little bit of an unsettling feeling in your stomach, right? Some of the usual suspects, but there are some new additions this year, and obviously some movement within the running back by committee, because these guys get devalued a bunch, right? So they get tossed around a little bit. So tell me this, which running back by committees do you like the most? And which ones are you absolutely, like, give me one that you really like and one that you're absolutely staying away from. And let's see if we can maybe parse which guys are important, which guys aren't important, and which guys are likely to see the field the most and get some volume.
Well, the one that I like the least is almost certainly the Patriots. Well, no, actually, that's not true. But the one that I like the least is the Seahawks. And the reason I like the Seahawks the least is that the roles are not clearly defined. It's not clear that either Eddie Lacy or Thomas Rawls are any good at football, and it's not clear that their offensive line is any good. So, like, I'm kind of afraid of those guys.
Yeah, I don't know that I can disagree with you on this one. I think the Seahawks is probably the most worrisome out of everybody's, maybe other than the Eagles. The Eagles is one that really, really worries me a whole lot. They got rid of their best back, so amazingly, and I mean, Blunt is just bad. Blunt's just not a good player. Like, he did. And this is actually going to transition into the reason why I think the Patriots is in some ways the most predictable when people think that they are the least predictable. Because it's true, they are on a week-to-week basis, but we're going to get to why I think in some ways they're the most predictable. But Blunt is just a bad football player. Darren Sproles is a pass-catching guy. Wendell Smallwood is like the most fine below average guys, right? Like, they just have so many players there, and nobody actually makes any meaningful sense as to why they should win the job, right? Blunt is just super slow. He's going to get goal line carries. They do like to run it in around the red zone, but they were pretty inefficient at it last year. And it's like, what guy is ever going to be a guy that I can start? If I could draft them all together, that's great, but I can't. So I'm not going to draft any of them, right? I don't want any of those guys. I'm really afraid of those guys. But the Seahawks are a close second because, you're right. Eddie Lacy and Thomas Rawls, we just don't even know if they're good at football. Plus, they're hurt. And then the only thing that we know is CJ Prosise likes to catch passes, and they like him as a player. I think he may be the one that's the most likely to just survive, right? just be a survivor out there, because
he's the most valuable to me because he's the one with a defined role. I know what I'm getting at least, so I know what I'm drafting.
And he's also arguably the last one being drafted out of all of them. Right?
Yeah.
And he's the
best value for sure.
Yeah, he's the best value. So if I have to go through the Seahawks, I'm probably choosing CJ Prosise, and then I'm just going from back to front because like I want to give the least value, like I want to give the least cost, right? To whatever player I'm picking out of there. So I'm probably going back to front. I'll take CJ Prosise, then Thomas Rawls, then Eddie Lacy if I have to. And if I get any of them at a super late round, then it's fine, but make sure that you know that they're pretty risky. Tom Cable is a great offensive line coach, but their offensive line is still in shambles. Like, Russell's just going to be running around all the time. So be careful of that one. So the one that I think I like the most is going to be the Patriots, I think. And it's for a very specific reason. It's hard to tell what Bill Belichick is going to do. I'm not going to claim to know what Bill's going to do at any particular week, but since the beginning of time, the top Patriots running back, which you can figure out by drafting two guys in the 15th and 16th round, the top guy at the Patriots is going to get 10 plus touchdowns. Okay, he's going to get over 200 carries and he's going to get 10 plus touchdowns. That's just the way that it is. Okay, they had 1 year, 2014, where literally they just passed the ball on every single play, and everybody got like 40 touches. It's honestly, it's the wackiest thing. It's the most Patriot thing of all time. But other than that, Gilly is most likely to be the blunt guy this year, right? He's most likely to be the guy who can just pound the rock inside the red zone, and he's going to wind up getting probably 13-ish touchdowns. He's not going to have 18. 18 is pretty crazy. But I wouldn't be surprised at all if he has 15 by the end of the year. I would be extremely surprised if he had less than 8. So he's going to be a valuable guy. He's going to get some yards on the ground. The other guy that I think follows closely behind him as the person to have, in my opinion, is Dion Lewis, because I think he's the best running back there. I think he's the best overall running back in the backfield. James White is completely out for me, even in a PPR league. He's just there to vulture 4 touchdowns in one game twice in a year, right? And then Rex Burkhead offers some interest to me, but I'm hesitant there, is all.
Yeah, I think Gilly's definitely the most likely guy to be the guy. And further adding to his value, as we kind of mentioned earlier, is that they're probably going to be blowing teams out, so they're going to be running out the clock in the fourth quarter. And when you're running out the clock, you're going to put in the big bruiser, which is at this point, as far as we can tell, is probably going to be Gillislee. Burkhead could do anything from be that guy, the best back, to be a special teamer and get no carries. So is he worth a late round pick, like 14, 15, 16? Maybe, if you want to hang on and see if he's the guy. Because if Gilly gets hurt, he almost certainly is going to be the guy.
Right.
And if he's providing value in addition to that, then that's great. But it is a bit of a mess after Gilly. And I at that point, I would only take those guys, White or Dion Lewis or Burkhead, in the much later 14, 15, 16, and just as a flyer.
Yeah, I've done the Dion Lewis thing as a flyer in some of the late rounds and stuff like that. Honestly, this is one of those scenarios where late in the draft, like let's say you have Gillislee already, I wouldn't frown upon you drafting another Patriots running back, right? You've already invested part of the way in that, and this mitigates your losses a lot. I mean, you're hedging your bets here, right? When you take this guy, 14th, 15th rounders are unlikely to play anyway. Right, take your kicker around early. Take this guy in the last round or something like that. And in that way you hedge your bets by a large margin. You get, I would call it 66%. Probably 60+% of the backfield at that point, because James White is not a guy. I don't consider them in quarters. I consider them probably Gilly's 40%, and then the next two guys are maybe split evenly. So if you want to treat it that way, take the next guy and mitigate your weaknesses a bit. So those are definitely the ones that I like the most. Let's talk about some of the in-betweeners. I would say that I would bring the Saints into this conversation, maybe the Falcons into this conversation, and with their new system, I would also bring the 49ers into this conversation. How do you feel about those, and do you have any to add?
Yeah, so the Saints definitely is one that I actually feel pretty good about. And the reason I feel pretty good about Mark Ingram. And the reason I feel pretty good about Mark Ingram is every year of his entire career, he's been in a 3 or 4 running back by committee, a committee of 3 or 4 running backs, and he's produced every year. Last year was the worst that the Saints have had as far as the running back by committee goes, and Tim Hightower still vultured away like something like 700 or 800 all-purpose yard or combined yards passing and or receiving and rushing. And Ingram still has consistently produced something like, well, last year was his best year where he finally got 1,000 rush yards, but he's going to consistently produce something like 1,000 total yards and like 8 to 10 touchdowns. And I think he's still good for that this year. He's not going to be as good as last year. He's not going to get 1,300 total yards probably, but he's going to get about 1,000, maybe a little bit more. And he's going to probably get between 8 and 10 touchdowns. So I think he's pretty safe.
I think the touchdown numbers that you said are maybe a little bit over, because I do see a possibility where Peterson gets some good goal line carries and that vultures some away from Mark. Plus, there's always the John Kuhn game that gets you 3 touchdowns or whatever. So and then they throw around the end zone. I mean, they are a red zone passing team. That's how they operate, no matter what. So, I think Mark is a good one. He's by far the leader of the bunch, and if you can get him in rounds, 6+, that's where I'm by far the most interested in drafting him, and that's actually where he's going. Right, he's going 5-6 rounds,
late round 5.
Somewhere around there. So if you're getting him at the end of 5, I give you my blessing to do that. I think that's a good one. Especially if some idiot ahead of you has taken Peterson already. I mean, look, if somebody takes Peterson and he blows up for 1,400 yards in the Saints offense, dude, just congratulations. You won the lottery, and that's how it happened, right? Like, you're just a lottery winner. That's all that happened. I think the other person that I'm willing to draft most in that system is Kamara because he's going so late. Not many people.
Yeah.
I don't think that he's going undrafted in many leagues, but he's pretty close, right? So, I wouldn't take Mark and Kamara because of the Peterson dynamic, which if Mark gets hurt, it's probably Peterson is going to take those touches, and then they'll probably either sign someone or just promote the 4th guy, right? And that'll be the other bell cow, right? Don't be surprised if Mark gets hurt and you see Tim Hightower back on this team, right? Or something like that. I wouldn't be surprised at that one bit at all. That's the kind of move that they'll pull because they just need a guy with legs back there.
They will have a committee regardless of how many people get hurt.
That's exactly right. It does not matter who is there. That's why people drafting Peterson in the 4th are just out of their goddamn minds, because it doesn't matter how well he's playing. There will always be a running back by committee there. So...
Okay, so then the other ones you mentioned, the 49ers, I think Carlos Hyde is the clear number 1 right now. I think Tim Hightower is sneaky number 2 right now. I think they signed him, and I think that they're not going to put these rookies in there, right? The other 2 guys are rookies. One's an undrafted guy, and one is Joe Williams.
Yeah, Matt Brady is the undrafted guy, and Joe Williams is the drafted out of Utah guy.
They've both looked fine in the preseason and everything like that, but... I think Tim Hightower to start the season is their number 2. I think Carlos Hyde is not going to last an entire season. He hasn't done it yet. So he's probably going to last about 10 or 12 games. So I think Joe Williams by the middle of the season will be their real number 2. I think he's, Hightower is what he is. I think Joe Williams has a bit more explosion and a bit better of a player, probably better of an athlete. So I don't mind Joe Williams as a late round pick. Shanahan's shown that his second running back is a viable flex option during bye weeks and things like that. But if you do pick Joe Williams in the late rounds, know that you should probably hang on to him for 3 or 4 or 5 weeks before you let him go, because I don't think he'll be especially productive the first few weeks.
I think all of those things are truly fair to say. There was a while that I was thinking Matt Breida might be the guy in line ahead of Joe Williams, but I quickly squashed that. If you use your eyes and watch the games, Joe Williams is the better player. He's the one that Kyle Shanahan went to bat for to try and draft. He definitely has the favor of the coaches. Tim Hightower is just a guy. You definitely brought up a good point with Tim Hightower being the primary backup for a small amount of carries, or especially if Hyde goes down immediately, he'll probably take up the bulk of that work for the first few weeks. Joe Williams is definitely a guy that I'm targeting this year, though, and I am willing to hold on to him for 5 weeks to see what he does, right? I'm willing to sacrifice a bench spot and hold him on my roster. I think Carlos Hyde is going to do a bit better than maybe you think as far as time played, but it's a concern. There's no doubt that it's a major concern, and it's something that you have to be aware of. And we we've already seen good numbers out of Carlos Hyde. With Shanahan, they could be excellent numbers, right? This could be a guy that could be in the top 10 running back category this year. So just know that if you make that pick, and he's a guy that's happened in the third, fourth round, late third, early fourth kind of thing, you could get top 10 play out of a guy that's that low. And just know that his upside could be truly excellent, but I would not draft him without also grabbing Joe Williams as well.
Gotta cuff him.
Yeah, I think you really, really have to cuff him. And if you want to cuff him with Hightower, I think that's fine. That wouldn't be my cuff, but I wouldn't tell you that you're absolutely wrong if that's who you cuffed him with, right? He's a rookie. I mean, rookie running backs are usually not that great, especially when they paid a guy for him to come there. So, Tim Howard can be, and you can have them at the same time, so it doesn't matter. Like they're being drafted around the same area, so it's immaterial. You may have to grab Hightower around earlier, So but just cuff him, cuff Hyde, no matter what you do. If you draft him, cuff him. So what about the Falcons? This is probably the most interesting one because Kyle Shanahan's leaving this offense now, and we've seen. We haven't seen a year where Kyle Shanahan hasn't been there for their two dynamic backs. So what do you think?
Yeah, and also Sark's never really been an NFL coordinator, although he's run kind of a pro-style offense in college. I think that Sark isn't going to change anything. I mean, obviously the in-game play calling will be slightly different because he's going to have his flavor rather than Shanahan's flavor, but he's not changing the offense. Like Matt Ryan's comfortable with that offense. As far as I can tell, they're still running the zone runs and all of that stuff. So I don't think they're changing the offense in a major way. I do think that, Devontae Freeman is being overdrafted. I thought he was being a little overdrafted last year.
Yeah.
I still think he's being a little overdrafted, probably half a round, not like a huge thing. And so if you really like him or think he's a guy, then you can take him where he's being drafted now, which is end of 1 or beginning of 2. I think the real value out of that backfield is Tevin Coleman because I still think that he'll be viable. I do think he'll score fewer points than he did last year.
He has to. Last year
he scored an unsustainable touchdown rate. He scored a touchdown every 12 touches last year.
Right.
That's incredible for a backup running back. That's incredible.
It's incredible for a starting running back.
Yeah. But so he won't be doing that again, more than likely. But he still holds immense value because he can play as your flex in any given week and be an okay flex. He won't be the best flex in your league, but if you're in bye weeks and stuff, he can play as your flex. And on top of that, if something did happen to Devontae Freeman, he becomes a top 5 running back in the NFL.
Yeah. I'm gonna disagree with you just a small portion here. I think that Shanahan's invisible value here, so to speak, drops them a little bit further than their previous years. I think that they're much closer in fantasy value together necessarily than they're being drafted, especially. So Devontae's being drafted anywhere from 10 to 20. Coleman's being drafted somewhere around the 5th and 6th round, somewhere even a little bit later than that in some leagues. I think they're probably just closer. That gap should be a little bit shorter. Because I think Tevin's an equal player, maybe just good, maybe better. They're a
little different. Tevin's more long range because he's gonna get more big plays, whereas Devontae's probably a little bit better in tight spaces.
Yeah, for sure. He's got the wiggle a little bit better. So, I'm really interested. This is one of the things that I'm going to be following closest this fantasy season, right? I want to see the impact of Kyle Shanahan not being there because I don't think these are bad players, right? I don't think Devontae and Tevin are bad. The other thing that you brought up earlier is that they just paid Devontae, so that's probably a little bit more likely for them to give him the ball. That's a bit of an incentive. But they could have just as easily not paid him and let him go and Tevin be the guy, and they could have just chugged along exactly the same. So
that's what they should have done.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's what they should have done, definitely. So I'm probably not too keen on drafting Devontae this year. And I'm much more keen on trying to get Tevin, especially if I'm in a situation where, I have really, really good receivers and I can play that guy as my running back too. And my receiver is an excellent flex, right? Like if I just need to survive with that guy, that's somebody that I'm probably targeting. So, and then the other important part here is I want no one after them. I want 0 people after them whatsoever. Yeah. Like it's them 2 or that's it. You know, the other, I'll tell you, this is actually a somewhat viable strategy, and I will almost never recommend this, but this is something that you consider this year. You can get both of them and play them. You can get both of them and play them together in some form or fashion, and you can just have an excellent otherwise team, right? If you get Devontae a little bit late, and then the opportunity arises where the beginning of round 7, wait a second, nobody's picked Tevin Coleman. Pick them, play them both. You have an excellent team otherwise. You should have picked some really, really good studs in other positions because you got those guys at value. So that's something to consider as well. Can you think of any other running back by committees that we maybe didn't approach?
Yeah, well, we should talk about Denver a little bit, just because I think it's a good opportunity to talk about another aging injured running back who might or might not be vulturing touches from an average, a middle-aged injured running back, C.J. Anderson. So over in Denver, they've got C.J. Anderson and Jamal Charles and Devontae Booker and some D'Angelo Henderson, some rookie who apparently has been looking good.
He's looked pretty good.
Yeah. So here's the thing with Denver. Their quarterback's not very good. Their offensive line's not very good. All of their running backs are always hurt. I don't really want any of them.
I don't think that's a detestable, position to be in. I have done this year. I am willing to take C.J. Anderson because he's a starting running back and he has value as a late round pick, right? There's a point where it comes where, hey, this guy is just more reliable than anyone on the board, and he's exceptionally injured, right? He's injured every single year. He has some sort of issue every single year, and he's just as much of a chance to lose his job as anyone else, right? So, but you're right. He's also, for some reason, he's not one of those guys that I'm willing to handcuff. Like, he's not good enough for me to handcuff. If it's behind him, I'll just let it go. I don't think Jamal Charles is really going to do anything this year at all.
Dude, I won't draft him until I see him play this week.
Right.
He's supposed to play this week. I won't draft him until I see him play and look like a football player. Because you could tell last year when he played those few games that he played, the few carries he had, you could tell he wasn't a football player anymore. He didn't have it anymore. So maybe in offseason got his confidence back. I don't know. I want to see it before I spend any pick on him. Yeah. It's undraftable for me until I can see him run.
Jamal Charles falls into that category of me. He's just undraftable, and if you draft him, I'm not gonna hate you for that. Like, I'm not gonna tell you that's the worst pick imaginable. I'm just not gonna do it. And if you win, hey man, you won. Congratulations, you struck the lottery again. You know what I'm saying? It's one of those. It's one of those. I will accept defeat if Jamal Charles becomes a top 5 running back again this year, right? Like, it's just you win. It's fine.
I mean, the thing with Jamal is he had like 1 or 2 years where he was really a bell cow, getting like 25 touches a game. Yep. Most of his other good years were getting like 15 touches a game and just getting like 8 yards a carry.
Right. He had 2 years. He had 2 years of over 300 touches, and then he had that 1 year that was an absurd touch year, just absolutely retarded. He had like almost 100 receptions and 300 carries. It was just stupid. He had 400. Yeah, touches.
He had 2 years with a ton of carries or a ton of touches, but a lot of his really good seasons, top 10 football seasons, have been with few touches.
Right.
So that part might make you think he can do it again. Not with this offense.
Yeah, probably not. The only other running back by committee I would like to lightly touch on, and this is maybe one of the scariest ones, and it is one that people are drafting from, is the Bengals. I'm actually very surprised to see Joe Mixon going in a much more appropriate place as he was earlier. He's going closer to the 4th and 5th round now, which I still don't want him there, but I can stomach people taking him there. Early projections when he was coming out, it was like, late 2, early 3. That's absurdity. It's once again, it's not because I don't like Joe Mixon. It's not because I don't think he's a good football player. I don't care. His past is in his past. He's a solid football player. The Bengals got horrible on their line. They're terrible. Their line is absolutely awful. Like, they're really, really going to struggle this year. And on top of that, they have 3 people who are all at least capable running backs in the NFL. They've shown it. They've shown it year in and year out. They run the ball a lot, and they're all at least capable of being running backs in the NFL. I want no part of any of those guys. I want none of them. I don't want any part of any of them.
Guys, the Bengals were a bad running team last year.
Right.
They lost their 2 best offensive linemen. They didn't become a better running team.
Stellar offensive linemen. They were excellent offensive linemen. Like, they were really, really good. Yeah.
And they still weren't good at running last year with those guys. They replaced them with bad offensive linemen.
Yep.
And
one is terrible.
And they added it. and they added a new running back.
Right.
So now they have 3 running backs instead of 2, and they have a worse offensive line on a team that already wasn't that great at running the ball.
Right.
So yeah, I'm staying away.
Yikes! Like you get a super yikes for that one.
Stay away.
Stay away. All right, I think we should hit a couple of late sleepers. We're going to gloss over them pretty briefly, but these are guys that you can try and get late on in your draft and either offer you really high upside, they offer you really good volume. They're better than underdrafted, right? They're just really, really good value for where you want to try and take them. And then I think we'll wrap up. We'll talk about some things that we want to look for in preseason week 3, a very important preseason, and then we'll get up out of here and we'll see you guys next week. So, Joe, who's your first pretty late round sleeper that you think can just perform well for you? He'll be a starter. He could potentially be a starter for you almost every week.
Well, at the tight end position, I would say Jack Doyle. I mean, I think that this is a guy who he should be a top 12 tight end. So in 12 team leagues, he should be a starter every week. Perhaps not the weeks when Luck is out. I'm not sure how to feel about Scott Tolzien. But Luck loves throwing to tight ends. Luck's gonna play most of the games this season. He loves throwing to his tight end, and they got rid of Fleener last year, and they got rid of Allen this year. So Doyle's the next guy up. He showed some good chemistry with Luck last year. He showed that he could be a productive fantasy tight end last year with Dwayne Allen around. And I just think that he takes the next step this year. So I think Doyle will probably end up being a top 8 tight end who's being drafted as like tight end 12.
Yeah. Chudzinski just loves his tight ends. That's just how it is. It doesn't matter who the quarterback is back there. Luck also likes tight ends, but Chud really loves his tight ends. So I think even with Scott Tolzien in there, I think that they'll call safe plays, and I think that he'll be the guy there. And I think Jack Doyle's fine. I don't think he's an above average player, really. He's an above average tight end, and he can block a bit. He runs good routes, so I think he fits the mold of everything that you would want in a safety blanket. And he also has some upside when Luck comes back. So I'm not even afraid of him. Like I would capitalize on people taking him later, right? Of him dropping in value because Luck is feared to be out. I would draft another player, wait around, and get him around later, and he's a fantastic tight end to have. I think he'll definitely be top 10. I think he'll probably be top 7 is right about where I have him. So I think Doyle is a phenomenal value. Moving on with also really good value. I don't know if this is somebody that you could wind up starting every week, but I think it's definitely way above where he's being drafted is Cole Beasley. Cole Beasley caught 85 balls last year, and he got 100 targets last year. We were talking about how Dez is overdrafted. Cole Beasley is the exact type of guy that Dak does like to throw to, right? So Cole Beasley, now it's not impossible that his targets could go down a bit. I don't see that happening, but it's not impossible that they could go down a bit. But he's being drafted in like the 14th round. Right, he's being drafted. I mean, pretty late in drafts, and for a guy that you can get that much volume out of this late in your draft, I'll consider that a win. Whether you have a safe team, whether you have a dangerous team, that guy's an asset that I'd like to add to my squad, no matter what.
Yeah, I'd say Beasley is probably not an every week starter, but he's a really solid guy to put in your flex spot during those bye weeks when your roster's looking thin.
Oh, he's great. He's really great.
I would say that PPR's value is much higher than standard.
Yeah,
standard, he might not be worth the lead sweeper, but PPR, he should be rostered for sure.
Yeah, 100%.
With the running backs, we made this point earlier, but I'll say Rex Burkhead, Deion Lewis in the late rounds.
Mm-hmm.
And again, this is round 14, 15, 16. We kind of mentioned their upside earlier. If they become the guy rather than Gillislee, they're going to get 10 or 12 touchdowns, and that's going to be top 15 running back that you'd get in the 14th or 15th round.
Yeah, I mean it's once again, it's fantastic value. It's potential fantastic value, right? And those are guys that somebody might be scrambling to pick up on the waiver wire and could win them their league. Just have that guy already on your roster. It does you a lot of good. And then look, if you figure out that it's very unlikely that they're going to get you anything and there is somebody available to be picked up, let them go. It's all right. That's okay if that's what they're there for. But you're really you're really really lowering your risk by taking those guys. Kind of how we were talking about earlier. So a receiver that I also think has pretty good upside, or actually really good upside, especially for where he's being drafted, is Tyler Lockett. Russell Wilson loves to run around and chuck the ball deep, and Tyler Lockett always seems to be there to be the guy that makes the reception. So he's being he's not being undrafted in leagues, but he's close, and he's a guy that you can get pretty late. There's no doubt about it that Doug Baldwin and Jimmy Graham are the first options, but they're not going to run the ball effectively this year. They're going to have to throw a lot, and Russell always does. They don't do anything the first couple of weeks, and then they wind up blowing up at the end of the season. So even if you don't draft Tyler Lockett is a great, great, great trade piece 4 or 5 weeks into the season when bye weeks start. Right. So look out for that guy. He's somebody that can be, he's even later than a late round sleeper. He's the trade sleeper.
That's right. So let me close. Let me pick our last sleeper. I got Jamal Williams out of Green Bay. Okay. And the reason is they don't have a real running back. Ty Montgomery's not a real running back. I know he changed his jersey number to become a running back now. But let's put it this way. You don't draft the Packers drafted 3 running backs in the draft this year. You don't draft 3 running backs if you're happy with your starting running back.
Yeah, I don't think that sends the vote of confidence to the incumbent.
Yeah, and I think Montgomery's going to. Let me be clear. I think Montgomery's going to be like the starter, especially because they play this 4 wide so much and they don't really run the ball a ton. But when they do run it, I think Jamal Williams is going to be the guy. Especially toward the second half of the season once he gets his feet under him and learns how to pass block and all that stuff. But again, the real reason is look, you don't. He's the highest drafted one. He's looked okay in preseason, and you don't draft 3 running backs if you like your starter. Don't.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. It's just the message that it sends. Sometimes coaches and organizations can really tell you what they're ultimately thinking, whether you see it on the field or not, or whether it may not translate immediately, but it gives you a good view of what's to come. Drafting 3 running backs just doesn't tell your guy that we have a lot of confidence in you. That may be okay with Ty Montgomery, right? Like, he may not want to be the running back. He's just doing his job, and that's respectable for what he's doing. So I do think that he's going to start off well for the season. He's one of those guys, though, that, if he's doing really well and you bail on him week 6, I'm not going to hate you for that. If you get your return for him, I'm not going to hate you for bailing on him halfway through the season, because there's a good chance that he won't be the guy when it's all said and done. I like Jamal Williams as the guy to definitely emerge. I think he's got the most talent there by far. And it's like he looks like the best football player to me. Right, he just looks like the best football player to me, and I like drafting those guys that my eyes tell me they have the highest probability of being there long term. Right. So, all right, tell me this: we have preseason week 3 coming up. This is the one where we normally see at least a quarter from the starters, maybe a little bit more. Some guys like to play in the halftime. What's one thing that you're really looking for? I know you can't say Cam. We know that we're looking forward to Cam. You can't say Cam. We know that we're looking forward to Cam. We're both looking forward to it. We want to see how that offense is going to run with him in it, because it's vastly different than Derek Anderson. Give me something else that you're looking for preseason week 3 that the viewers should maybe be locked into.
I want to see what the Patriots are doing with their running backs, and I want to see what the Patriots are doing with their receivers. They made big changes at both of those spots this year. Talking about Brandon Cooks, and I want to know, as far as receivers go, I want to know how Brady looks with Brandon Cooks, how they use Brandon Cooks. Do they put him in the slot? Do they put him out wide? And what's the trickle-down effect on the other receivers?
Yeah.
And I also want to look at the running backs and see, in the short yardage situations, who are they giving the ball to? Because if the first quarter and a half, 2 quarters are giving it to the same guy, that's the guy I want.
Yeah, no doubt, 100%. Seeing who rolls out with the ones and who gets the volume in this case, especially with the Patriots, can sometimes be really telling and help to locate that second guy that you may want in your draft, right? There's a couple of things that I'm looking for. With the Browns announcement that Brock is probably not starting at this point, and Kaiser is likely the guy. I've been calling for Kessler. I'm not necessarily a Kessler lover. I just thought that he was a better option than Brock. And I thought that the only thing that he really lacked is his ability to drive the ball downfield. Everything else he can pretty much do. Well, that makes all the guys at the Browns way more relevant to me and draftable, right? If Kaiser can just do those things and be adequate, I think that he'll start. I really do. I think that he'll start the season, and they might as well move forward with him. So the Browns players have a lot more relevance to me if Kaiser can just make intermediate throws, just not make too many mental errors, because that's a bad sign for a rookie, and usually teams want to start him. He doesn't really have that luxury to start behind a guy for a year. And then the other thing is that I also want to see. I want to see another week of Tom Savage getting the ball reliably to DeAndre Hopkins, and I want to see. We didn't really see Lamar Miller play at all last week. I want to see him play this week, behind the line, and I want to see how long they give him to play. And then the third and final thing is I'm keeping close tabs on the Bears this year. I was really afraid to draft the Bears receivers when I thought that they were going to play Trubisky. Then they decided that they were going to play Glennon. I was less worried about that. I'm still not worried if Glennon plays, but now seeing that Trubisky can at least operate the offense, right? I'm not super scared of him. I'm way more willing to put myself out on a limb for a Bears player than I was before, but I want to see another week of how they grasp that and who they roll out with the ones and what the dynamic is there. So those are the things that I'm really looking forward to this week. If you guys have any questions, get in our Discord. I put the links into the live chat. Check us out on Twitter. Make sure you follow us there. If you have any questions, please don't be a stranger. We want to hear them. Let us know content that you want to talk about next week. Next week, we're going to get into DFS as well. We're really excited about that. It'll be 2 weeks before we get into DFS. Sorry. Next week, we'll talk about the last couple of things that you want to do as prep for your season. If there need to be any last-minute pickups, people that you want to drop and stuff like that, we'll talk about some of those things. But until then, we're out of here. Joe, you got any last words?
Stay classy. See you next week.
Good deal. We'll catch you cats on the flip-flop later.